Most people think football fans are reacting to a game. A lot of the time, they're reacting to what the game says about them. That's why a World Cup result can change someone's mood for days, even when they never stepped onto the pitch. And if you've ever sat through all of that excitement feeling absolutely nothing, this video isn't about what's missing in you. It's about what your attention already belongs to. A World Cup match ends. Your phone lights up immediately. Messages arrive faster than you can read them. Flags appear on profile pictures. People start talking like they personally survived something together. You scroll through it for a few seconds, then put the phone down. Nothing really lands. The strange part isn't that you don't care. The strange part is how quickly that starts to feel like a problem. Everyone else seems emotionally involved. You feel like you're standing outside a conversation that the entire world somehow agreed to have. For years, the explanation has been simple. Football fans are passionate. People who don't care just don't get it. But that explanation leaves something out. Because the psychology behind sports fandom isn't really about football. It's about identity. It's about belonging. And sometimes, it's about borrowing emotions that don't completely belong to you. So before we talk about why billions of people care so much about the World Cup, we need to start somewhere smaller. We need to start with the moment you realized you were supposed to care and didn't. That moment usually happens long before the match itself. The strangest part isn't the World Cup. It's noticing you're the only person in the room who seems untouched by it. You scroll through social media, and your feed is flooded with match highlights. The group chat is blowing up after every single goal, with notifications popping up non-stop. Monday morning at work, coworkers are crowding around the coffee machine, breaking down the starting lineups. And you just silently keep scrolling. The human brain has a strange biological quirk. It automatically monitors where the crowd is looking. When everyone points in one direction, standing still and not reacting creates an invisible pressure. You feel out of place. And then, instead of questioning why the event out there is so hyped, you start turning inward and doubting yourself. You ask, am I supposed to feel something here? You wait for a spark of excitement, some kind of connection to click. Nothing arrives. Nothing at all. But think about it. Maybe the uncomfortable feeling isn't indifference. Maybe it's difference. Maybe it is just difference. And in a hyper-passionate society, that difference gets judged surprisingly fast. Most people don't pressure you to love football. They pressure you to react correctly. Someone at the office excitedly asks which team you were rooting for last night. You just smile and shrug, telling them you didn't watch the game. Instantly, the conversation stalls. The mood just drops. They look at you with total confusion, as if you just said something incredibly bizarre. Our brains have this unconscious habit. Social groups always secretly reward emotional alignment. When you laugh at the same things and worry about the same outcomes, you signal that you belong. On the flip side, an absence of excitement gets treated as a red flag. This is exactly why so many people fake enthusiasm just to avoid friction. They tell themselves that it is simply easier to pretend they watched than to deal with the awkward silence. But nodding along with the crowd is not the same as genuine connection. That's different. It is entirely different. The real social cost doesn't come from disagreement. It comes from non-participation, which raises a more interesting question. Why does participation feel so important? Listen carefully after a victory. The word "we" appears everywhere. Listen closely whenever a team wins. You will hear the word "we" echoing everywhere. Fans flood the streets to celebrate. and social media explodes with proud status updates. People hug each other and shout that we did it. But look at the simple truth here. Not a single one of them actually touched the ball on the field. This phenomenon reflects a very specific psychological mechanism of the mind. When a group wins, the boundaries of a fan's personal identity suddenly expand to merge with the team. The brain automatically blurs the distance, turning the glory of strangers into a psychologically shareable reward. Nobody asked permission. No one needs to ask for permission to feel that pride. This mental flexibility allows us to connect deeply with the world around us. And yet, the cost arrives quietly. When you lose yourself too deeply in the crowd, your self-worth accidentally becomes tied to outcomes you have absolutely no control over. You ask yourself, does this feeling of victory actually belong to me? This flexibility is actually hiding something much deeper. The goal isn't always the goal. Sometimes it's what the goal says about you. Just look at what happens right after the final whistle blows. People excitedly wear the team's jersey for the entire week. They all change their profile pictures on social media and then repeatedly rewatch a single goal over and over again. Even the way they walk the next day has this extra bit of confidence, a little different than usual. Here is the psychological secret. Most of us don't actually attach to the team out there. We are just holding on to what the team allows us to feel about ourselves. The identity of a successful group temporarily boosts an individual's self-esteem. It brings a vibrant energy that everyday life rarely offers. That's the switch. That is the exact psychological shift. And yet, the true source of this emotion becomes completely invisible. You defend them with everything you have, ready to argue fiercely for your team. But deep down, you aren't protecting those strangers on the field. You are only protecting a version of yourself through them. A lot of passion is identity wearing a disguise. And once identity enters the picture, the brain behaves differently. The most addictive part isn't the goal. It's the possibility of one. Just look at what happens in the 88th minute of the match. The game is tied. Not a single person dares to look away from the screen for even a second. Every single run, every tiny tackle at this point suddenly feels incredibly massive. Here is the secret. The brain's reward system responds most strongly to unresolved outcomes. Uncertainty keeps our attention locked far more effectively than a clear result. When the situation keeps shifting, your mind forces itself to constantly update its predictions. Almost matters. Every near miss suddenly becomes valuable. This mechanism keeps your attention completely captured by the anticipation, rather than the actual action on the field. The screen, you get trapped in the thought that something explosive could happen at any absolute second. The human brain often chases uncertainty harder than the actual reward itself. But none of this works without one critical ingredient. The hook can't grab what's never attached. As the match heads into those final minutes, the atmosphere around you tightens like a guitar string. Everyone holds their breath, sweating and barely blinking. And you? You just look up at the clock to see how many minutes are left until it's all over. While the crowd sees a high-stakes drama unfold, all you see is a long, drawn-out waiting period. This difference comes down to a fundamental rule of how the brain works. For uncertainty to trigger the reward system and capture your attention, it requires a previous setup of personal identity. Without that connection, there is absolutely no emotional investment, no stake, nothing to lose. You are completely immune to the emotional storm out there, paying zero psychological cost. The only real price you pay is often a misunderstanding from the people around you. People like to call that indifference a form of apathy, but most of the time, that is not what it is at all. The World Cup adds another layer to this. Crowds solve a difficult problem. They tell you who you are before you have to. Just look at what happens around any major tournament. National flags appear everywhere. Massive collective celebrations are organized, and shared grief is expressed right after every single loss. The crowd gives you an instant sense of belonging. There is a very simple secret behind this appeal. Large groups always provide a ready-made collective identity. You just step in and put it on, with absolutely no effort required to build or define yourself. Convenient. It is just convenient. But the price you pay for this convenience is not cheap. When you lose yourself in the crowd, you risk inheriting all of their emotions before you even decide if those feelings are actually yours. You ask yourself, do I actually care about the match, or am I just jumping into the madness to feel less alone? Borrowed certainty is very easily mistaken for genuine passion. Which leads to the real question beneath the entire video. The story was never about football. The story was never about football. Football was just the measuring tool. This whole conversation was never actually about the sport. Football was just an invisible measuring tool. Just look at your own life. You might be staying up all night for a creative obsession, building a deeply connected circle of friends, or chasing a challenging personal mission. It could be a niche interest that absolutely nobody around you understands. Your mind is not emotionally broken or detached from the crowd. Humans always need a place to invest their emotions. It is just that our destinations are completely different. Your energy isn't missing. It is just busy flowing in another direction. That's the point. That is the exact point. When you follow a navigation map that is different from the crowd, you will always look disconnected to them, but that is completely fine. Your strongest attachments always reveal themselves through the very things that fail to move you out there. If you have already found your own true world, walking out of that passionate room is not a form of isolation. It is a form of freedom. By the end of this, the interesting question isn't why millions of people care about the World Cup. People have always looked for something larger than themselves. The more interesting question is what happens when a group starts carrying parts of your identity for you, because that's the real divide here. Not football versus non-football, not fans versus non-fans. It's the difference between an attachment you consciously built and an attachment you quietly inherited. Some people find those attachments in stadiums. Some find them in work they can't stop thinking about. Others find them in a handful of people whose messages they never ignore. The destination changes, the mechanism doesn't. If a World Cup final leaves you completely unmoved, that doesn't tell you much about football. It tells you where your emotional investment isn't. And sometimes that's more revealing. A person isn't defined by what grabs everyone else's attention. They're revealed by what still holds theirs when nobody is watching. The strongest attachments aren't the ones you talk about. They're the ones that quietly decide where your attention goes. I'm curious about something. When everyone around you gets pulled into the same event, the same trend, or the same collective excitement, what is the thing you keep returning to instead? Not the thing you think should matter, the thing that actually does. If you enjoy psychology that starts with ordinary behavior and follows it somewhere deeper, subscribe. There are more conversations like this ahead. Long after the crowd moves on, your attention usually stays behind. That's often where the real story is.